Hey there and welcome back to another Disney video. And today I want to talk about a film that I feel like I've forgotten a whole bunch. Like, when people talk about the revival era of Disney and how they became good again after a solid decade of less than impressive box office numbers and critical receptions, people always seem to throw out the same names. The same films, stuff like Frozen, Moana, Zootopia. Yeah, those are deserving names, big names. They've earned their recognition. And I'll admit, I'm as guilty of this as anybody else. I often forget that this film exists on a regular basis. It just fades from my memory, and that's a shame. Because by every metric you measure this thing by, it was a slam dunk success. It had a budget of $165 million and ended up grossing $657. And that's actually very successful earnings at the box office. It was the highest grossing animated film of 2014, and really, when you compare the numbers, it was about as successful as Moana was, except I guarantee that this sold more toys. Baymax! All the different colourful heroes in their armour. This was made to be a franchise. Because not only was it a financial triumph for the studio, but a critical triumph too. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 90% critical approval rating. That's very high for a Disney movie. And then on top of that, it has a 91% audience score, so pretty much loved by all. And I do remember that it was a very popular film, way back in the day when it came out at cinemas, 10 years ago. Ugh. And on top of that, it won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, beating out How to Train Your Dragon 2, which I think is pretty impressive. And on top of that, Baymax has remained a massively popular character. But it's almost like his popularity is kind of separate from the movie. May as well have called the film Baymax, because that's all anybody seems to talk about whenever it comes to this movie. Everything else clearly gets shuffled off to the side, it gets forgotten. And I think that's a massive shame. I mean, we've already established that it doesn't really make any sense, as the film was good and people went to see it. But somehow it just faded away a ton. It's only been a decade and yet it had no real staying power. It's truly bizarre, and like I said, a shame, as it really is a quality film and it deserves a lot of praise. Especially since it's actually a massive rarity in the Walt Disney Animated Studios catalogue. It's a sci-fi film, is it? Yeah, I'd call it a sci-fi film. It might be considered a superhero film by Wikipedia, but let's be real. It has a pocket universe, microbots, sentient cuddly robot, and more. It's sci-fi. And historically, Disney has not had much success with sci-fi. Recently, Strange World was a box office bomb. Treasure Planet lost money. Atlantis the Lost Empire was a disappointment. Lilo and Stitch was a bright spot that did well for the studio, both critically and commercially. But Meet the Robinsons didn't really go the distance either. It was a box office disappointment. And so, like I said, I think this makes Big Hero 6 a very special film. One that bucked this trend, although I do think that the fact that at its core it's a superhero film did have a lot to do with its success. After all, the 2010s were the era of smash hit superhero movies. But yeah, it also succeeded because it is genuinely a good film in pretty much every aspect possible. Of course, when you're talking about an animated film, you gotta start with the visuals. And whilst even in just the 10 years that have passed since this film was released, the animation industry's kept on rolling and gotten more and more advanced in their visuals, this movie still holds up really well. And I feel like it was, at the time, a big leap forward for Disney in terms of their visual quality. They'd always seemed second place to Pixar, but the Baymax rubbery design, the hair, the nanobots, they just look so good, so awesome. It was like nothing I'd seen before in animation up to this point. In fact, I think you'd be forgiven for assuming that this was actually a Pixar movie if you saw the film with no context. And I think that's very high praise, and I just don't think it gets enough credit for how groundbreaking it felt at the time, and even now, really holds up. And this animation, this top quality animation, went a long way in making the film's action sequences come to life. It's a superhero movie, so you need good action for a superhero movie. That's just a non-negotiable. So much of the drama that the story builds and the payoff of the story comes from Baymax and Hero both getting smacked around by villains, but also laying the smack down on the villains too. It's just so well done, particularly when they're having battles against yokai with those nanobots, and also when Hero makes Baymax the evil murder bot briefly. That scene's epic. That action's epic. And they've been building up to it through all the previous action sequences. These battles are so awesome. And I honestly think that this film has Disney's best ever action sequences. And I think that should be commended. It's impressive. And then the final minor element is that it has a banger theme song. Immortals! Those end credits with that song blaring. Oh, that's good stuff, pal. The rest of the score, honestly, I don't really remember it much, so I fear that means it was a teensy bit forgettable. but I think that's often the fate of many Disney soundtracks that don't have actual songs being sung by the characters. The score helps tie everything together, yes, but ultimately it fades into the background, as we see here. Or here. But it's not the music, or the animation quality, or even the action that ties this film together and makes it one of Disney's best, but rather the narrative elements. In the end, it's the story, and particularly the characters, and how they interact with each other and the world around them that is the heart of the film, and pushes it into that top tier. The top tier of just being pure awesome. The story revolves around Hiro, a child prodigy who spends his time doing things like illegal underground robo-fights, and this lands him in a bit of trouble. And so, in an effort to safeguard his brother's future, his elder brother Tadashi takes him to the San Francisco University to show him what he could achieve if he puts his mind to it. And here, Hiro meets Tadashi's friends, as well as the robot Baymax, an inflatable healthcare robot, and this in turn drives him to try to earn his spot too. So he develops special microbots that can work together and are controlled by the user using a special neural transmitter. However, these bots are then stolen by the villainous yokai under the cover of a fire which kills Tadashi. And after some mourning, Hiro's inspired to try to retrieve the bots and get some justice with the help of Baymax, who he's taught to fight using martial arts programming. And with the help of his brother's friends, they discover that it was actually the class's professor, Professor Callahan, a respected member of the university faculty, that had caused the fire, and who seemed completely and utterly remorseless about what he'd done and killing Tadashi. And in fact, he was just eager to do more, all to try to seek revenge for the death of his daughter. And I gotta say, the supposed death, as after all that, she isn't even dead. After coming a little bit unhinged, Baymax and Hiro have to try to save the day, with Baymax eventually sacrificing himself. Hiro's left grieving, only to discover that Baymax had saved his AI chip, aka his brain, allowing Hiro to rebuild him, and it's all happy endings. Except for Tadashi still being dead. But hey, minor details. And I think I specifically want to hone in here on the character of Hiro, because in my eyes, he's probably one of the best protagonists in the history of Disney. He just has so many narrative layers, so much complexity. For starters, he has flaws, a lot of them. At the start of the film, he's listless, doesn't really care, he's just chasing the thrill of robo battles. He has no ambition. He doesn't care to apply himself. But then he's encouraged and inspired by his brother, and he gets a kick in the pants, which leads to a period of growth where he proves himself, but after his brother's death, he fades back into that listlessness. He moves backwards, 1 step forwards, 2 steps back, until he meets Baymax, and together they work to bring Tadashi's killer to justice. But then he stumbles again, and he tries to kill Callahan, understandably, after he discovers the truth about what happened, and notices Callahan's lack of remorse. And so then, he has to come to terms with his brother's death, and realize that what he tried to do was wrong, before he can finally finish his arc with a victory against Callahan and prove himself a true hero. Like, he has a proper arc. He changes across the course of the narrative. He isn't always right, or really often right. He's made mistakes, he mistreats his friends. He almost crosses that point of no return before he's pulled back and earns the redemption. And really, it's his interplay with Baymax that's the core of this film. Alone, Baymax is cute, yes, but he doesn't work as a character. Well, he does, but he wouldn't work as well. He's cute and sweet with that lovely voice, but it's perfect because he has this sour, moody teenager to bounce off of, to look after, to care for. And really, I could go on and on about the various different interesting side characters, but this is ultimately the movie of Hiro and Baymax. Their bond is what drives everything and forms that emotional heart. The only point of comparison I'd have here would be Hiro and Tadashi, but that ends relatively quickly in a classic Disney parent death. And I know he was his brother, not his parent, but you get what I mean. And then you toss that in with some pretty top-tier humor, a lot of well-paced drama, and a fairly decent villain twist that I did not really see coming at the time. And you got yourself one heck of a movie, and one that does not get enough credit for how good it was, and that deserves a more memorable legacy. And so yeah, not really much else to say, and so I'll leave it with this. These have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of Big Hero 6? Do you agree with me? Do you think it deserves a bit more recognition, or maybe not? Maybe you think it sucks. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.